Step 12 appears to be electronics, or wiring, I should say. This is where you want to be really careful. Anytime you start getting to the part where you're doing electronics or wiring, pay very close attention. I don't know anything about this 3D printer, so I'm assuming that they have it labeled for us. Considering that everything else, for the most part, except for a little bit mishaps by me, by dropping screws, dropping tools, and not really paying attention to instructions, it went fairly well. It's assembled, except for the plate, for the most part. So we're going to now move into the wiring part. So what I'm going to do is get the wires kind of pulled out so I can actually see them, make sure that nothing's caught, make sure everything is free that I can get to. So it appears that we're going to have the extruder wire up and mount up. So we want to make sure we're grabbing the extruder motor. And it looks like they've already prepared the wires for us here, which is really neat. So let's see if they're labeled. Well, yep, okay. So if you look on the orange tabs, they actually have the wires labeled. So X goes to X. The E goes to the extruder. So let's see how we're going to do this. So the X motor is going to be this motor here. This is the X motor. This is your X axis. As this extruder moves left and right, or if you're facing a machine, left and right. So this X that's on this cable, if you can see on this cable, it's kind of hard to see, it's little writing. X is going to plug into the X. There should be only one way that these things can actually go. So you have the big X cable. The big X cable is actually going to plug in to the X motor. And this can only go one way. So you want to be careful that you face the plug the correct way. If it doesn't go, don't force it. You can really mess something up. And so you have another one that has 4 pins on it. That's going to be the extruder. That plugs right into the extruder motor. And you also have the limit switch for the X. This is going to plug into the X limit switch. And it's on this side, and it goes right through here and plugs in only one way. It's a little tough to get your hands in there, so you want to be extra careful that you don't pull on a wire or press on a wire. So there we go. So that's nice and free. And when you're doing any type of wiring, you want to make sure that nothing's being pinched or nothing's getting in the way of the gears or any motors or any friction. And of course we have the Z on the bottom. Now what's cool is the Z is already pretty close to it, and it has Z on it, and it's really by itself. So you kind of can't mess this one up. But you want to make sure it's flipped the right way. It can only go one way. And that's what the tabs, the little ears on the top of the Z, kind of facing towards the top. Be careful when you plug these things in. You don't want to do any damage to the pins. If they don't go in, one of your pins actually may be crooked. You can grab a little screwdriver and fix it. The Y motor appears to already be attached, and so is the heat bed. Now, this appears to be the power supply. Now, the power supply is pretty simple here. Power supply itself, for the most part, is this cable that's by itself. These two ends match. So you can go ahead and plug that in right now, like that. So I plugged in the ribbon cable here on the last side. Now, if it was me, I probably would have went ahead and plugged in this ribbon cable before I actually got to this part, just because it would have been easier. So for the most part, it looks like all of that's plugged in. There is one thing here that I forgot, and that is the Z stop. So you want to make sure you plug in that as well. There we go. Let's see. I had it turned the wrong way. So at this point, I'll kind of want to see what I have and kind of what is not plugged in. And there's one more thing, and that's the power cord. This goes on the side here, really simple. I'm going to make sure that switch is off for now. I don't want to have any things scare me. Now, if you haven't checked, and I know I've mentioned this twice already, and so did the instructions, if you haven't checked the voltage on this thing, make sure it's properly set. If you don't have it set right, you're going to be in big trouble. All right, so the last thing I really have to do is just plug this thing on and see what happens. So I'm going to run this, having this switch off, and I'm going to run this to the power.